Seeing that it is 7 o'clock, I will call to order the board meeting of the Prior Lake Savage Area School District. We will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All members are present tonight, with the exception of Todd. Next on the agenda is the approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
By Lee. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ben. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That passes 6-0. Next on the agenda is the consent agenda. Consent agenda items are considered to be routine in nature and will be enacted by one motion. There's no separate discussion on these items unless a board member has previously requested that it be removed from the consent agenda. On tonight's consent agenda is the check wire transfer disbursement summary, the bank reconciliation statements, the approval of the school board meeting from September 11th and September 25th, resignations, terminations, non-renewals as listed, and the assurance of a compliance report, and also the approval of the district curriculum advisory membership. Do I have a motion to accept the consent agenda?
So made.
By Stacy. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Ben. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That passes 6-0. Next on the agenda is the resolution for the acceptance of gifts. Tonight we have a gift from Respect Retreat for our middle schools from the Shakopee, Mdewakanton, Sioux community. Do I have a motion to accept the gift?
So made.
By Ben. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mary. Seeing this as a resolution, it calls for a roll call vote.
Aye.
Aye. Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
That passes 6-0. Next on the agenda is Laker Pride. Tonight, the school board is recognizing Minnesota School Boards Association. They provide the local school board here with training and insight into upcoming legislative sessions, along with many other opportunities on policy. And they would like to present Eric Pratt with an award. So with our respect to them, I will introduce Denise Dietrich and Kim Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Superintendent, members of the board. As the chair just mentioned, my name is Denise Dietrich, and I work for the Minnesota School Boards Association in the government relations area. And each year, there are many services that the Minnesota School Boards Association provides to support school board members in the state of Minnesota. And one of the things that the government relations team does is we award an outstanding legislator of the year, and we usually give 4 of those awards. And tonight we are so grateful to you for allowing us to present Senator Pratt a well-deserved outstanding legislator of the year award tonight. And so, Mr. Chairman, with your permission, I would like to take a couple of minutes to provide you some of the reasoning why we are awarding Senator Pratt this award.
You may.
Thank you. So, as mentioned, I would like to just highlight a couple of the reasons that we chose Senator Pratt. And first of all, let me just say that Senator, and I'm sure that you already know this, that Senator Pratt has a very high-profile job at the Minnesota legislature. He is the chair of the Education Policy Committee. That means he is the gatekeeper of a lot of education policy that desires to become law. And so he is... and he has done that in a very short time at the legislature. He is a 2-time senator, which is quite an accomplishment for a 2-time senator. But with that, I just want you to know, as school board members, that during this, as messy and sausage-making like that the legislature gets, Senator Pratt always sought the voice of school board members. He continually, between him and his legislative assistant and committee assistant, they continually checked in with the Minnesota School Boards Association and wanted to know what we thought of potential legislation. Not that we always agreed on every piece of a legislation and how it should be handled, but he always sought out the voice of school board members. So we want to thank you for keeping him informed and involved in your school district, because it does transfer then to St. Paul. So we thank you for your part in that as well. And then as we contemplated as far as what passed in the legislative session, we were trying, it was really a very obvious choice in Senator Pratt, because Senator Pratt was tackled one of the biggest education reforms in the area of teacher licensure in the state of Minnesota. He was the champion and the chief author of two major teacher licensure reform pieces. And the first one was he authored the bill that merged the teacher licensure activity into one board, and that board has a new name, and it is I always have to read it because it is an interesting one. It is the Professional Educator Licensing and Standards Board. He was the chief author of that, and he guided that along all during session, and he was very instrumental in getting it passed. And he also, once again, continued to ask our advice, and one of the pieces of advice that we continued to give him was to include, for the first time ever, a human resources person on this board, and that actually stayed in the bill, and we think that that is just one of the many positive things about that new board and how it is to function. And so the other thing that, the other piece of legislation that he authored and played a big part in designing was the new 4-tier teacher licensure system. And I'm not going to go into detail about it, but if you have any desire to read more about it, and maybe you have already looked at this is the legislative summary that the Minnesota School Boards puts out. And in that, it has a description of the new 4-tier system. And I can't emphasize enough to you about how this is historic reform in the state of Minnesota. And I just want to highlight some of the behind-the-scenes action that was going on in regards to that bill. And the other chief author in the House, Representative Erickson, they held numerous meetings, and in fact, there were 45 iterations of this bill. It survived one governor veto. They held over 25 meetings. They had at least 1,000 hours of discussions, and each and every step of the way, he invited the voice of Minnesota School Board members and took our advice and really included us in the process. So that is our rationale for awarding Senator Pratt Outstanding Legislator of the Year Award. And so with that, I would like to.
Very much.
Oh, dings. Mr. Chair, may I?
Why don't we come, do you want to stand up front and address the?
Sure.
Sure. And why don't you have Denise and Tim comes, and so we can take pictures.
So,
Center, right here. Yes. Well, you're not shy.
I'll hold my bell for you now.
Center, though, center.
Well, I just want to take a quick moment to thank the Minnesota School Boards Association for naming me Outstanding Legislator of the Year and being able to share this award with Representative Sandra Erickson out of Princeton and Senator Greg Clausen out of Rosemont. They're two of my key partners in the legislature and worked very hard. It's a little depressing that 1,000 hours of discussion on this. Wow. As Denise said, there was a lot of work that went into this bill and a lot of iterations. And let me just give you a little bit of background on this. This process actually started back in 2016. We spent the summer and fall of 2016, an election year, 12 of us on a bipartisan working commission reviewing the findings from a legislative auditor report. And out of that effort, we passed unanimously 6 resolutions that really became the guideline for the new bill that we've seen, which is the first, is really the first major reform in teacher licensing in 40 years. Now, how this all started, before I even knew I was going to be chairman, before I knew I was going to be chief author of this bill, Senator Clausen and I sat down for breakfast, and we ended up going about 3 hours. We were there so long, the waitress quit bringing us coffee so that she'd get rid of us finally. And we worked through most of the big issues that faced us and came out with a basic framework that really survived all the iterations and all the discussion that we had. Now, along the way, as Ms. Dietrich said, we took recommendations from the School Boards Association, Education Minnesota, the Principals Association, education advocates along the way, and we tried to incorporate them basically to smooth and polish the bill as it went along. And quite honestly, when it passed out of the Senate, it passed with bipartisan support. Now, I bring up that story because I'm so pleased to be here tonight to receive this award. I still have 4 of the current board members were my colleagues when I served on the board. And I thought about it, you know, I served with 15 different people on this board and 3 superintendents. Now, for those of you that don't know, I could kind of be a pain in the neck. And, but this was a very formative experience for me, and the experience that I had with my colleagues on this board really helped, I think, influence who I am up at the legislature. We didn't always get along. I was kind of known for losing 5-1, 6-2 votes, or 6-1, 5-2 votes. But the one thing I'll say is that regardless of where we were on those votes, treated each other with respect, and we worked through our issues. And I'll say that when we did come to the really big issues, I mean, I think about not only did we overcome $1 million deficit in this school district when I joined the board, but we also built 3 new buildings. When I left, we were financially solvent, and we had the highest enrollment that we'd ever had. And we lowered property taxes a little bit at the same time. We came together as a team, and it's working with the 15 other members, and including the 4 that are up here and the superintendents. I don't know that I've ever thanked them for that experience, because I use that experience every day in the legislature. So
He does. He does.
And a lot of the people up there are tired of hearing the stories too, but I want to thank this board, current administration, previous administrations. Thank you for helping me be who I am. Thank you for your friendship and your. Now I'm stuck and I'm speechless, and you'll all enjoy that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Superintendent, would you like to?
Rich,
Joan?
come on.
She directs really well.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Well deserved.
Congratulations, Senator Pratt. Thank you for being here. We have a lot more Laker Pride coming this evening. Absolutely thrilled that so many people are here this evening to see and hear all of the recognition that we have. Actually, I think we're doing the check presentation now, right?
Oh, okay. Yep, that's next on. the
Yes.
agenda.
Yeah, so I would at this point like to invite up the Rotary Music Fest co-chairs. Fisherman, you're up next. You're up next. Darcy Rose and Guy Solinsky, if you would please join me. We have an amazing partnership with the Prior Lake Rotary Club who support our schools in so many ways. But one of the major contributions and partnership that we have is with the Music Fest. So this evening, I think Guy's going to say a few words, and then I believe we'll have a check presentation with much gratitude that we will appreciate.
So the Prior Lake Rotary Club and its members, we're very active around the world, locally and nationally as well, with civic projects and charitable projects and donations. And the primary funding vehicle we use for that is the Lakefront Music Fest. And this year was an outstanding success. We had over 24,000 people in the park those 2 days, 10,000 on Friday and over 14,000 on Saturday. We learned a lot. We weren't prepared for quite all that many people, but we did learn, and it's going to be even better next year. And now I'm going to turn it over to Darcy to say a few words.
I just want to thank the schools, the PTCs, the LABC, the PAAs. They did an outstanding job for us this year. Without your support in our festival, I don't know how we could have done what we did. Like Guy said, we had 24,000 people in the park with all the volunteer hours and the selling of the tickets and the raffle tickets. It was an outstanding weekend, and we truly, truly appreciate everything that the school district and all of the support that you've given us. So because of that, we have a check for you. So the combined total is $71,765 with all of the tickets that were sold, the volunteer hours that were given to us. So thank you very much, all of you.
We have representatives of our PTCs as well as PAA and our boosters. If we could all please come up here. This is an amazing amount of money that you all spent a lot of hours helping with. And certainly we are incredibly grateful to the Rotary Club for this. And students that are the actual benefactors who are here this evening, which is great. Thank you. We look forward to the continued partnership. And it was new this year. The PTCs, this was the first year that they joined the efforts, and we have much gratitude for all the work that they do to support our schools, and especially to be a part of this. So thank you both very much. And now, since we are Prior Lake Savage area schools, we're going to do some celebrating around our lakes and an amazing accomplishment by two of our students. So Russ is going to kick things off, and then we'll have our students come forward as well.
Thanks. Come on up. I'll have them come up first. So joining us tonight is Coach Brian Provost and two seniors, Ben Provost and Mason Raveling. We're here to acknowledge and celebrate their accomplishment in the Minnesota High School Bass Fishing Tournament. Prior Lake fishing team had a great year. They sent 4 teams to the state tournament on Washington Lake in Dassel, Minnesota. Ben and Mason won the state championship, and now will enter the National High School Bass Fishing Tournament in Kentucky Lake, Tennessee, and I think this is your third time going to the national tournament as well. I'd like to play a quick video for you. We were spotlighted on KARE 11's Minnesota Bound. Our Prior Lake fishing team was, and then they're here to answer any questions and then just see the certificate of accomplishment from the board. So I appreciate the time tonight.
Hi, everybody. Raven and I welcome you to the show. Now, a question for you. Name one of the fastest growing team sports in our Minnesota high schools, huh? Well, it involves not a bat and ball, but a fishing rod and a boat. Travis Frank has the story.
Boat launch traffic jams build angler anticipation. On Minnesota's Whitefish chain of lakes, hundreds of bass anglers have come for their shot at a championship title. Come takeoff, their anticipation rockets. Shane Raveling has won dozens of bass tournaments in his fishing career, but today his driver's seat takes a backseat.
Do your thing, boys.
His son Mason and teammate Ben Provost are after the top prize.
Our goal is to get to nationals.
First place today will punch their ticket.
Nationals, there's $80,000 in scholarships up for grabs.
To win, they must fish as a team.
Just find the fish and catch them.
Mason and Ben represent Prior Lake in Minnesota State High School Bass Fishing League, a booming organization that launched their first bass tournament in the summer of 2012.
We had 8 teams that participated in that event, and then since then it has grown. We had about 20 teams, and now this year we've grown to over 262 members, of which just under 200 of those members are fishing in our state championship this year.
Clubs form when 2 anglers secure a sponsor.
That adult sponsor can be a parent, it can be a school member, or it can be an adult BAS member to help them get started. And once they have the 2 members, they start their club.
Minnesota is following a national trend, bringing fishing into public schools.
The membership for Minnesota is $20 for them to join as a member, and out of that $20 we provide 4 tournaments, so basically $5 is what it costs them to fish per tournament.
On the Water School is in session, taught by some of the best in the bass fishing business.
You don't want to blow up on your spot if you can help it, and then start out in 20 and work your way into about 12 and work up on top of the pump.
Mentors provide a boat and advice, then their hands are off.
The kids love it, and they get a volunteer boater who is a solid bass fisherman. A lot of them are professionals. They get to go out in a $30, $40, $50,000 bass boat, sometimes 20, 30, 40, 50 fish a day. Our youth at this age, they just absorb this knowledge. They're like sponges. The more you give it of something they like, the more passionate they get, the more time they want to spend on it.
So at this time, I'd like to have Brian share some information about how our program got started and where we are today in terms of numbers and the support that we've had in our community for it. So Brian, come on up.
Perfect, thank you. Well, our program started 2 years ago. Dan Stoll and Shane Raveling and myself started the program with these kids. We started off, we held the team to 20 participants last year. It's a phenomenal sport, and it's really growing. That was taken last year, that video, and there was 200 some participants. This year, almost 700 participants fishing bass at the high school level. So it's grown dramatically. This coming year, there'll be over 1,000 kids fishing bass, and there's a lot of logistics involved and a lot of studying by the kids. This year we had 35 kids on the team. But logistically, it's challenging in most other sports. Kids got to study. Each lake is different. Unlike most sports, there's 90 feet between bases, and football fields are all 100 yards, and tennis courts are about the same size. And so it's a different sport that every lake is different. You may or may not have ever fished that lake before. The kids study, learn the lake pre-fish days and sometimes weekends before the tournament. And it's grown, and the kids are just loving it. And they're getting boat captains, as Jeff on the video spoke to, that oftentimes might charge $500 a day to take someone out and fish for 4 hours. They're taking these kids out all day as part of this program, and it's pretty phenomenal to see it grow the way it's grown. So we're thinking next year will be well over 40 kids, probably over 50 kids on the Prior Lake fishing program. Another situation is sponsorships. We collect sponsorships. Ben's representing All Train Tackle, which is actually a person out of Savage that owns that tackle company, and you can see on the jerseys, these are all sponsorships that provide dollars to the anglers so that they can, lower the cost to participate, offset some of the costs of tackle, pay for gas for the boat captains, etc. So phenomenal program, and it's just a blast to see these kids grow in it. Actually, Ben and Mason both this year fished their first professional tournament, and the top 10 are going to regionals to represent the state of Minnesota, and Mason took 6th and Ben took 8th, so they're off to their first pro national, or divisional event next year. Maybe turn it over to these guys for any questions you might have for Ben or Mason.
You guys just want to share maybe a favorite moment, maybe something that you'll take with you from the program?
Well, probably my favorite moment was the first tournament Ben and I ever fished was on Whitefish, the same lake that was in the video. And we were both freshmen. We didn't know each other, so we went out fishing, caught some fish, and we ended up winning the state tournament the first year we fished together. So after that, it's just been a blast, winning tournaments, fishing together. I mean, you got anything?
Yeah, I think one of my favorite moments was when that first pro tournament was, I came in, I had 6 pounds, thought I probably won't make it. And then the next day I came in with 23 pounds, 77 ounces with 5 fish and made 8th place.
Awesome.
That was pretty fun.
Very cool.
Why don't you guys come up here a minute? Just want to congratulate you, tell you how proud we are of you for representing our entire community so well, and for helping, I'm so glad there are so many students here tonight, for helping students understand that, it really is about you finding your passions and going after it. And I love the connection to education, that you're studying, you're learning all the time, and that's what we hope happens here for all of our students as they become lifelong learners and really go after their passion areas. So congratulations, we're really proud of you. It's fun to watch your careers.
Thanks.
And yet another Laker Pride. So I know we don't normally have this many to celebrate, but all of these were really timely, and we wanted to be sure that we had time. One of the things as an E-STEM district that we're really excited about is our focus on environmental education. And in the last year and a half, there's been a commitment by so many people in the school district to really think about environmental education from a garden perspective. We currently have 7 school gardens in our district, ranging from 9 beds of vegetables to lots of flowers to all kinds of amazing things at each of our sites. We have parents, staff, students who volunteer, community members who volunteer to maintain those gardens throughout the year, and certainly into the summer as harvesting happens. This summer, we employed the help of our high school students, kids company students as well, to spend all summer doing some gardening, weeding, harvesting, and ultimately ensuring that our crops got to people who could actually use them. So I know we have a lot of representatives here tonight from all of our sites who have been engaged in this work. And right now, I think I'd like to hand it over to Emily. Is that right? Our Assistant Director of our Child Nutrition Services team, just to share a little bit more with us, and then we're going to get some students up here to get highlighted.
Like Dr. Stallo said, this is really a district-wide initiative.
Oh, your choice.
Like Dr. Stallo said, this is really a district-wide initiative, this E-STEM and gardening. And because we have so many that have so many wonderful things to say, I'd like to have everybody come on up, and we'll just hear from all of the students and teachers and community members that have participated.
They're going to talk here. They can use that, so I'll take this one. Okay, well, the little kids will really need that, you think?
All right. I'm just going to scroll through some of the pictures as we talk about each of the gardens. The high school garden, which is that 9 beds of vegetables, is a huge undertaking. So we've had the eco team members, and then we also had our kids company, our Red Tail Ridge Kids Company group walked over from Red Tail Ridge to the high school garden to help weed and harvest. So I have a couple of people who are going to say just a few things, and then we'll scroll through the pictures.
Stand over here?
So right here.
Right here?
Bianca.
Okay. All right, so hi, I'm from the Prior Lake High School Eco Team, and we're here to talk to you about our high school garden. So our eco teamers and the environmental science classrooms have all worked together to start this garden. It began producing last spring. However, we've been a part of the rewarding process of watching it grow throughout all of its stages. So us three personally have been involved with constructing the beds, laying the soil, and planting the seeds.
And one benefit of the garden is that it can be used, not just for science classes, but for, a wide array of uses. For example, biology classes use it, for labs. World language classes can even use the garden to practice vocabulary, and environmental science classes also use the garden to demonstrate sustainability.
And one cool thing that we've done with the garden is recently the FACS classes made herb salts that they gave away to parents at conferences last week, and we actually brought some herb salts for all of the board members.
This doesn't violate the gift.
Okay.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Sorry. Yep. Cool.
Emma?
Hi, my name is Anna, and I'm in 3rd grade.
So they're on the camera.
Yeah.
Right this side.
Hi, my name is Anna, and I'm in 3rd grade. Hi, my name is Laura. I'm in 5th grade. This summer we participated in the garden project at Red Tail Ridge Kids Co. Once a week we went to the garden at the high school and we did some harvesting and taking care of the garden. I liked that we could sample some of the fresh vegetables right off the plant. I also had a lot of fun at the garden. I liked that it was a hands-on experience, and I also liked that the profits from selling the produce were donated to the Rock Organization. The Rock Organization is a group of people who donate backpacks with easy, healthy meals to kids in need. And it makes kids really happy to go home with a backpack full of food to eat. I hope that next year at Summer Kids Co. that we will do the same thing because the vegetables were really fresh and I liked the gardening experience and the farmers.
I'd like to present the check right now to Rock, if that'd be okay. So they harvested and then they had a farmer's market for the parents when the parents picked the kids up from Kids Company. They raised $150. Thank you. Great job, you guys. Thank you so much. All right, so we have more gardens. We have, I'm just going to scroll through a couple pictures here. That's a farmer badge. The eggplant plant leaves are sticky, so they all would wear their farmer badges. It was very cute. So we've got 5 Hawks.
Hi, I am Laura Higman, 4th grade teacher at 5 Hawks. And last year I got this great idea. I was up at Wolf Ridge doing a summer course, and I saw their garden. I thought it was amazing. So I wanted to employ my 4th graders with a project-based learning project to create a garden. So they planned, researched, designed, and created the garden for 5 Hawks. And then this year, now all the students, K through 5, can enjoy the garden. So, Addie, what is your favorite part of the garden?
That we got to pick vegetables and have a salsa party.
Yeah, it was fun. I let them try and figure out how to make salsa with the random ingredients we had from the garden. So it was fun. We had a good time. It tasted delicious. So, that's 5
Great
Hawks.
job.
Thanks.
Thank you. Grainwood also has 4 beds, excuse me, but I don't have any representative from Grainwood here, so they're doing great things too. They've got some herbs and some potatoes, and I believe they have some squash and pumpkins. And then we have the Red Tail Ridge Garden.
Second grade, I helped plant the sunflowers and basil. I also helped water the plants over the summer. I love working in the garden and helping our school.
At the Red Tail Ridge Garden, we do a bunch of things to help the produce grow. In 5th grade, I was in a group called the Junior Naturalist. We take care of environmental stuff. Sometimes we would rake the soil, water the plants, or even pull out weeds. We also planted some veggies, such as carrots, lettuce, basil, spinach, etc. Sometimes we would do little things for the garden just in our classes, too. The garden is a great place to learn how to take care of plants in a simple way. You can make your own garden, too.
Good job. Thank you. Thank you. Now we have Hidden Oaks Garden. Okay, Cameron? I'm good. Can you stand up there? All right. Okay.
You gonna talk or am I?
You're gonna talk.
So we have a smaller garden because we're a small group. We have an alternative classroom, and we started this as an integrated learning. So we had an English project, math project, science project, and a social project all in one. So we started with a book called The Seed Folks, and it has somebody from each chapter is from a different country, so they got to put their social studies into it. They had to plan everything. So all of their math was, they got to figure out how many cubic yards of dirt we needed, and when they found out that it was 4 and they had to move it, they were not exactly thrilled. But so they ended up filling up the gardens. As you can see, this is our science project. So we grew all of them organically, but then they got to choose how they were going to do it for a control group and a non-control group. So this is, those on the right, those are the ones that are actually growing. Those on the left, some of them had Mountain Dew, some of them had Coca-Cola, some of them had milk instead of water, so they didn't do quite so well, but it was science. So Cameron's favorite part is
getting the salsa at a competition of selling.
we actually did it as a marketing thing too. So part of their English was they actually had to write up an entire advertising campaign. So they came up with T-shirts, they came up with a commercial, and then they had a plant sale. So for part of the plant sale, they had to have a competition to see who could actually be the best employee. And some of the teachers that came in, they left tips, and at the end of the day, as the entrepreneurs that they were, they decided who worked the hardest and got the largest percentage of the tip. And surprisingly, they all agreed on the same people. So we have vegetables. We did not do sunflowers last year, that was the year before, and they missed them this year, so we do have to put those. But we have some things that come back every year because we leave them in to reseed, and other things that we just plant at each and every year. Anything I left out? No. Thank you.
Good job. All right, and last but not least, we have our pollinator garden in Jeffers Pond.
Hi, I'm Leanne Weichel. I'm a first grade teacher at Jeffers Pond, and I brought with me
Megan Waller. I'm also a first grade teacher at Jeffers Pond.
My name is Evan.
He's a first grader in my class this year. We started out a year and a half ago with just a butterfly garden, but we've done some improvements and upgraded it to a weeding and reading pollination station. We've added a little free library, reading benches, and lots of community involvement. Our students can go and simply care for the pollination station, aka they can weed it, and then they can read from the little library. We've added over 100 science-based books, so when you go to our little library, you can do some research, you can read about facts. It's pretty awesome. All our kids have access to the library, but we are utilizing it specifically in first grade for a lot of our science. We have units in life cycles and habitats, and we use it extensively for observation, research, collaboration, and experimentation. We've also gotten pretty creative with the care and maintenance of the area. This summer we hosted 4 weeding and readings. Kids and their families came, learned to play the weeding wingle game. Evan is a champion. They helped weed the garden and enjoyed several guest readers. Each time Mrs. Waller was our expert reader, and then we had a variety of other guests. Dr. Warner, our principal, came. Sue Mohm, our district naturalist, came one time, and then just last week, Bobby Johnson came from Carol Evans Grow with Care. He helped us put in our new Kinder Crisp apple trees, and he read the apple pie tree. So we learned what we're going to do. Pretty cool about the Kinder Crisp is it's a cousin to the Honey Crisp, but it grows kid-sized snack apples. So Evan will be about a 4th grader when the first apples come, but we're getting there. So I thought this would be a good time to interview Evan about some of the things that he knows about the garden. Evan, RJP Pollination Station is important to the bees and butterflies because
It provides them a place to stop and rest.
And having a pollination station at school is important to you as a student and a kid because
I really like when bees and butterflies come to our Zephyr's Pond pollination station.
Do you like going outside for learning?
Yeah.
Do you like being active?
Yeah.
Do you like being in the spotlight right now?
Yeah.
So you really love outdoor learning because
I can hear so many different sounds, and sometimes I can see animals.
All right. Thank you. Wow. Why don't you all just come up quick so Christy can get a picture? This is pretty phenomenal. You know, there are amazing things that are happening every single day in our schools, and we don't take enough time to publicly recognize the adults, the parents, the students, the staff who really create awesome learning opportunities. So I'm glad we're doing it tonight. Thank you all for keeping alive environmental education in Eastham in our district and for being such great role models for all of us. Thank you.
Next on the agenda is personal items, and for that I'll hand it to the Executive Director of Human Resources, Mr. Matt Mons.
All right, good evening. First up on our agenda here, I would like to recommend the following candidates for employment, and I'm seeking board approval.
Do I have a motion for the acceptance of the candidates for employment?
So made.
By Ben. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Lee. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0.
And next, I would like to present the following leaves of absence, and I'm seeking board approval.
Do I have a motion for the acceptance of the leaves of absence?
So moved.
By Mary. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Ben. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0.
All right, and next up, I've got a certified staffing request for the 17-18 school year. And this is a request for an additional 1.5 FTE in the area of special ed in our level 1 and 2 settings at Prior Lake High School and at Red Tail Ridge Elementary. We did, of our incoming student cohort, experience a larger than usual cohort of students with special needs, and that's the reason for this request.
Do I have a motion for the acceptance for the additional staffing for the 2017-18 school year?
So moved.
By Lee. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Mary. Any questions or comments? Seeing I do have one. This has been reviewed by Executive Director of Business Services, correct? And within
That's
our
correct.
budget?
Yes.
All right, thank you. Seeing no other questions, All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0.
And next up is an educational support staff staffing request. This comes to us as we've seen our kindergarten numbers rise at the very end of the summer just prior to the school year at Grainwood, which has created one class of over 24 kindergarten students who are looking for an educational support staff or a student support paraprofessional in that classroom. And then we're also looking at some additional noon supervision given the size of the student population at Red Tail Ridge. And our middle school tennis program has grown to the point where they need an additional halftime coach in that program. So with that, I make the request.
Okay, do I have a motion for the acceptance of the additional staffing for the 2017-18 additional support staff? By Ben, do I have a second?
Second.
By Stacy. Are there any questions or comments? And again, this has been reviewed by our Executive Director of Business Services, Ms. Sink, and within the budget constraints. Okay, thank you. Seeing no other questions, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0. We're still with you, Mr.
Yes, and lastly, we do have 3 revised job descriptions coming forward. Just want to note that these are all updates, and we just had some natural transitions in these respective programs and thought that it was a good idea to simply update the job descriptions.
Okay, do I have a motion for the approval of the new and revised job descriptions for the Kids Company Assistant Coordinator, Media Support Person, and MinCaps Coordinator? Do I have a motion for acceptance? By Ben, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Lee. Any questions or comments? Melissa?
I just have a quick question on that. The min caps, so because that's a shared, isn't that a shared position between the 2 districts? Or is this the one that we hire?
This is a shared position between the districts. That's correct. So all of our MinCap staffing, from a budget perspective, are shared positions at this time, yes.
So does Lakeville School Board also take a look at this job description because it's shared?
In this case, they'll be operating off of our contract, and so they'll be a Prior Lake Savage Area Schools employee. They will not be a Lakeville Schools employee. However, from a budget impact perspective, we do share the staffing there. But at this point, the majority of that staffing operates on Prior Lake Savage Area Schools contracts.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yep, absolutely.
Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0. There's no unfinished business, and we move on to new business. First on new business, I will introduce Dennis Hugevin for the 2016-17 final audit presentation. And Executive Director of Business Services, Ms. Sink.
Good evening. Dennis is here tonight to go over the summary for the audit. The board has seen the majority of this and had discussions at our work session throughout the last couple of weeks, and so most of this will be familiar to you.
Thank you, Julie. As I said on September 25th, I'd be back to do a brief overview, a high-level overview. It's about 180 pages. We spent about an hour on it on September 25th. And so tonight's going to be a little bit of a higher-level summary of the key elements of the deliverables from the audit. We've extracted from the executive audit summary some key elements and put them in a PowerPoint. With me tonight is John Tower, we have a John Tower, but it's John Lorenzini. He's not going to be speaking unless I need to pull him up here and ask a specific auditing question. He runs the day-to-day aspect of it with the audit team here. And he's just getting over a cold, so his voice is a little bit raspy, so I'm going to call him up as needed. But we always want to start by thanking once again the business office, Michelle Seifert and Andrea that do a lot of our interactive work with the audit team. They do just a fantastic job, and we do pull Julie, and of course Julie gets her share of audit effort as well, as including food service and buildings and grounds and gym and community ed. I mean, everybody really want the district administrators to feel like the district was audited, and so we do pull in a lot of people that you probably wouldn't even expect get pulled into that audit process. So let's go ahead and dig into the executive audit summary. And to the extent you have questions as we go along, don't hesitate to throw those out, and otherwise we'll just keep tootling right through this. So, as a board, and I mentioned that I only mentioned this one time, but a lot of things, I try not to repeat myself from what we've already covered in an hour session. This is a lot more abbreviated. So one of the things you hire as a board is an auditing firm to be the eyes and ears of the board. And so one of the ways that one of the aspects of the work that you ask us to do is to give an audit opinion on the district's financial statements. The district does put together a comprehensive annual financial report. It is bigger than a traditional financial statement. That's why it's called a comprehensive annual financial report, or we go by the acronym CAFR. You've done that for a number of years, and we are pleased to be able to report that we're issuing a clean or an unmodified audit report this year. Once again, you've been accustomed to that kind of an opinion, so it's as good of an opinion as we're able to give any Minnesota school district. So that's always good to hear. And then by state statute, we have to follow government auditing standards. And they issued that under a yellow cover in a book many years ago, and it became known as the Yellow Book Opinion, only because it had a yellow cover. But it's governmental auditing standards, and there's two aspects to that. There's a compliance aspect and a internal control aspect. We had no compliance issues related to that aspect of that letter. We had the same internal control comment that we've had in past years. It is identified as a material weakness, but it's only to the extent that you rely on the auditing firm to help draft a GAAP-compliant financial statement. Very, very common. Auditors have assisted with drafting the financial statements for many, many years. About 10 years ago, they told us we had to start telling you that that's really technically an internal control weakness because you're relying on someone other than your own internal staff to do that. But it's the same finding that you've had for years. So we talked about that in the session on the 25th. And then because you expended more than $750,000 of federal funds, I think it was about $2.25 million actually that you expended as far as federal funding. We had to perform a single audit, and this year we were able to test the special education program and get to the percentage of coverage that we needed to. And we had no findings related to your special education program, which was our major program this year. So that was a good result as well. I just think you'd be amazed at the disproportionate amount of audit effort for $2.25 million. The amount of audit effort for that little bit of funding in the context of the overall finances of the district, you'd be amazed at the amount of audit effort. So I always encourage you, if you ever do have the ear of a legislator on a national level, make sure they keep indexing that rate because it's a disproportionate amount of audit effort that's required. I'll leave it at that. And then you also hire us to do a legal compliance audit. So the Office of the State Auditor puts together a very thick checklist of state statutes that you have to test your compliance with and adherence to. We noted no compliance issues for 2017. It would not be the end of the world if we had something to report. It's fairly common with our school district audits to have some level of legal compliance exception, the most common of which would probably be like the late payment of a bill. So if you meet monthly as a board, by state statute, you have 35 days to pay all your bills that are valid and, owed. So that becomes very common because typically an administrator will have something sitting on their desk or something over the summer and it doesn't make it over to the business office in time. But we had no issues to report. I'm just telling you that if you had it, it wouldn't be the end of the world. But you also hire us to do your student activity audit. It's got its own rules. There were some new rules this year called the MAFA manual. It's a chapter of the UFAR's guidance from the Department of Ed. And again, very, very common to have some level of exception there. We wrote up, based on Department of Education guidance, because it's a cash basis opinion, there is something in there that looks like a finding, but it really isn't in that. Every single school district has that commentary about it being a cash basis opinion. It's not a full accrual financial statement or anything like that. It's just simply cash basis. So you have to have a report an exception in that standpoint, but we don't consider it a finding necessarily because everybody has that, and it's just based on the guidance from the Department of Ed. There's just one new GASB to implement this year, is GASB 73. That is just a replacement of GASB 27, and it's for non-OPEB type of pension benefits. So it's just a different way to calculate the liability for the benefits that were already basically recorded on your financial statements. One of the aspects of formal required communications, there's a separate letter in one of those 180 pages of documents that I was referencing, just to highlight the fact that if there were any uncorrected misstatements, we would be required to report that to you. There were none for 2017. If there were any disagreements that we had with management, we would be required to tell you that as a board. Nothing like that to report. So, getting into some of the key aspects of the executive audit summary, this is just a 5-year historical trend of your student enrollment. And again, just phenomenal growth. And I referenced at the workshop session, I was working at Eden Prairie Schools back in the early 90s when we were adding 400 to 500 new kids. And I know what a school district goes through to be dealing with that kind of growth and all the different consequences of things you have to develop and positions and facilities and all those other things. So to be able to see you guys handling that very well, which only because I can relate to it having been there at Eden Prairie. So in terms of numbers of open enrollment, I just wanted to point out you do a very good job in terms of attracting kids. You have 724 students opting out of the district through open enrollment, and you have 1,030 kids opting in for a net positive variance of 304 students. So very positive impact in terms of the revenue that those students generate for the district. So that's very commendable to see such a positive trend over these last few years. The next slide is just a historical 5-year trend of the general fund. In terms of revenues, you had audited revenues at 88 million. Expenditures came in at 85 million, so you added about $2.9 million to your ending fund balance. The ending fund balance is broken up into a number of different categories. The non-spendable category means that you've already invested that fund balance in either prepaid items or inventory, so it's not available for anything else. Restricted fund balance, the legislature likes to attach a string to dollars when they give you new funding. So there's a number of areas where under UFARs you have to use a specific FIN code to track the expenditure of funds, and whatever's left over unspent gets set aside in a restricted balance. Most of that's like operating capital, long-term facilities maintenance, and things like that. Your assigned fund balance is strictly a statement of intended purpose at a point in time. It's all detailed out in the report. You set aside funds for cash flow purposes, class size reduction, innovation, Q-comp, and site carryover, all good things. But it doesn't tie your hands any more than just a statement of intent at a point in time. If you needed to use those resources for something different than what you had stated at June 30th, you can certainly do that. You're within your realm. So we always want to draw your attention back down to that unassigned fund balance category. As a board, that's the line item, within the general fund where programmatically you've got resources available to make decisions about what things you want to invest in and how much you want to set aside for future needs. Your 5-year trend there is very positive. You went from 7% in 2013 to 10.11% at 2017. I would not consider that excessive by any means. It's a very good place to be. Our state economy is such that the withholding on your state aid is only at 10%, but we're only, since 2012, it was at 40% aid holdback. So it's not excessive from that standard at all, but very commendable outcomes. In terms of revenue, looking at the 5-year trend on revenues, you can see the incredible growth, most of that tied to the enrollment growth, of course. But the legislature's been funding about 2% improvement in the formula, so a lot of it over and above the enrollment growth is, above the formula improvement is just the growth in the funding formula and the growth of the number of students served. I wanted to point out 2014, you see the large dip of about $5 million in the tax category, going from $12 million down to 7.4. That was the year the legislature was able to pay back the tax shift. They have an accounting mechanism that they use to balance the state's budget. So if you looked at 2017, the local property tax revenue for $14 million out of $88 million, that's about 16%. I think the average citizen wouldn't necessarily understand that that small percentage is paid by the local taxpayers, and that 70% or 80% in your case is paid by state sources. So again, in the context of resources, it's always interesting to note that the state pays a lot higher share of what people actually perceive. On the next slide, in terms of expenditure per student, this is simply taking the total expenditures of the general fund and divided by the number of kids that were generating aid. And again, make the point that it's a non-traditional bar chart in terms of most bar charts that you'd see for traditional school districts would have the trend continuing out, so the cost per student would be a gradual increase every year. This gets impacted by the amount of capital that gets expended in the general fund, but for the most part, you've done a really good job of holding the line in terms of the cost per student that you're expending each year, so very commendable. On the next graph, I decided to add a new subtotal this year, just for context. We used to have just the bottom line total of pre-K-12 operating expenditures. You can see, if you looked at the line toward the middle for, I call it the general fund subtotal, if you compared 2016, the middle column of 7-county metro area for 2016 to the middle column under Prior Lake Savage, 2016, 11,958 for the 7-county area metro average based on profiles data available from the Department of Ed versus 9,532 for Prior Lake. So that's not surprising to you guys. You have less resources available, so you expend less per student. But where you are expending the bigger share of the dollars, it's not coming in the form of administration, which is the top line. It's coming from the classroom-related type programs like regular instruction, vocational, special ed, et cetera. The next slide just simply takes all of the expenditures of the general fund and subtotals them by object dimensions. You can see if you took all the salaries and compared to the final amended board-approved budget to the actual costs, again, made the point, no surprises. As board members, that's what you want as far as outcomes. You don't have to live with any regret of what decisions you would have made in hindsight had the numbers turned out differently. If you adopt a budget as a board, you can have a really firm understanding that that's what the outcome's going to come very close to that. You have a long history of that here, so it's very commendable. You can look at the two most important lines, salaries and benefits. Think about $250,000 of that employee benefit variance is related to a flow-through entry that we have to record at the end of the year that you wouldn't know for budget purposes until the TRA letter comes from the Teachers Retirement Association. So most of the lines, if you looked at the very bottom line, you can see that most of the variance is related to simply the timing of capital items, capital expenditures. And then if you also factored in the site carryover, you allow you don't want to necessarily have a use it or lose it mentality, right? So you allow carryover for certain aspects of budgets that get allocated to the building. So anything that's unexpended for supplies and materials, for example, a lot of that would typically go into the assigned category of fund balance for carryover. So good, very good outcomes. No surprises once again. In terms of your food service program, running a very successful program for your food service program. Got some information there as far as number of lunches served. Anytime you're adding to the fund balance, that's available to invest in back into the food service program through the capital needs of the program. It takes pressure off your general fund or other capital funding that's available to the district. So again, very good outcome. There's a chat graph there as far as the percentage of reduced price, free price, and full price meals. Community ed continues to run. I don't know why I keep advancing too far. The community ed program is continuing to be very successful. And again, because this is a program that people voluntarily choose to participate in based on the program offerings that you've got as a district, it's really good to have a very balanced outcome. You're going to have some years where you might have a slight increase in fund balance and other years when you have a slight investment. But again, the bottom line impact is that you've got a very healthy ending fund balance, and it's just a good indication of running a very successful program. I would be more than happy to answer any questions anyone has for us at this point.
Okay. One technical, I saw you brought in some documentation. Are we to get the hard copies, or was I incorrect?
No, there are hard copies for anybody that would like one.
Okay.
I don't know where the box ended up, but.
My office.
Okay.
Okay.
If
So
you'd
maybe
like
after
a
the
hard
meeting.
copy, I do have one in my office. Otherwise, you do all have it electronically.
Yep, okay, thank you. And then with that, first I'll have a motion for the acceptance of the full audit for the 2016-17 school year.
So made.
By Ben, do I have a second?
Second.
Seconded by Lee. With that, are there any questions or comments for Dennis? Ben, go ahead.
Dennis, thank you. One thing from a material weakness, you had stated that it's noted as a material weakness when we have an outside firm do the auditing for us.
No, the drafting of the financials.
Drafting of the financials. How often does that occur in Minnesota school districts? Is that something that is exceptionally common, or is that the opposite? And where does that, I guess, where does that put us? And is that a?
That is, I don't know if the word exceptionally didn't jump into my mind, but it's very common.
Okay. And is that a, I think I know your answer being an outside auditing firm, but is that a additional benefit of increased checks and balances to not have an in-house individual or team prepare that?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, I mean, it's just a matter of, do you see it as a benefit having an outside firm prepare the financial statements, so it's additional checks and balances that essentially would go into the preparation of that statement?
Do I see it as a benefit? I see it both ways. Actually, I don't know of my client base. There are some districts that have the capability of doing it, but don't necessarily have the time. And I think that would probably be the case here if we actually took the time to go through. There's a bunch of paperwork in terms of disclosure checklists and understanding the conversion entries from going to the modified accrual to the full accrual. So again, in this particular case at Prior Lake Savage, it's just something that we haven't kind of decided to make that a high priority because there's so much other things in terms of growth that's going on and the investment of time and effort from the business office. So I don't see it necessarily as a positive or a negative thing. It's just the choices that the district has made in terms of prioritizing the investment of limited resources. You know, there's more important things to worry about, in my opinion, than being able to do that independent of the CPA firm.
Okay. So focusing more on the day-to-day operations and what's going on in the schools.
That's where I personally, when you're adding 400 or 500 kids a year, I mean,
Yep.
in terms of prioritization, that's where I would, it wouldn't be a high priority of mine, but to the extent, that's for you guys as a board to decide if that was a high priority or not.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Excuse me.
Are there any other?
I have a question.
Sure, go ahead.
So at our study session, we spent a lot of time taking a look at this, and we received the bound piece.
Of the executive audit summary?
Yes, okay. And that, maybe, I need some clarity, because this one had a lot of different, it had all of the same information in it, but in the summary that we're seeing tonight, I'm not seeing the statement of net position, where we talk about our
Yeah.
total long-term liabilities and things like that.
Yep, and it's in the bound, I mean, obviously, the bound issue, or copy has the updated version of that now.
But it's not in the executive summary report?
We did not choose to extract that particular element to put into that report, no.
Okay.
But I'd be glad to answer any questions that you've got regarding it.
Yeah, just to make sure that I have an idea of how it is, because I thought that would be in there too, not just expenditures and revenue, but also our liabilities.
Yeah, and I don't think it was in last year's either. It's just a matter of the auditing firm deciding, in terms of the limited time that we have available. I don't typically get into a discussion about the full accrual financial statements for any school district, just as a matter of understanding of what that really is, because it's such, to me, I always want and I think I explained this at the work session, I always want the board members to be focused on the fund level activity, because that's where, you know, you can have the most impact in terms of the general fund, food service, community ed. When you roll all of that up into one line item and have all of your assets in one column, you know, all of the assets and all those individual funds that I want your attention to be focused on, when you roll that all up into one column and add in your undepreciated assets less your liabilities, it's just meaningless to my way of thinking. So the fact that you have actually a net positive number is highly odd. So on page 6 of the executive audit summary, if we took all of the district's assets, you know, undepreciated value of your assets, subtracted all of your liabilities, including your share of the estimated pension liabilities for TRA and PERA. The reason we don't typically talk about it is because most school districts have a very, very, very large negative number there. like your negative equity. So if we wanted to liquidate the school district as of June 30th, sell off all your assets, pay off all your liabilities, most districts would be millions and millions of dollars short, and you have a net positive number. So it's actually very positive here, but I wouldn't be, as a matter of routine, I wouldn't normally review it with a school board, because the liabilities that we're putting on your books now, you know, starting with GASB 68 for your share of the unfunded pension liabilities of TRA and PERA, that is such a complex understanding of how that liability gets assigned to you that it really is meaningless, to the point of it's there, but I don't want to, I mean, I wouldn't mention it unless you asked me, but yours is actually a net positive number. So, the liabilities went up very significantly this year because of the change in GASB in terms of how those liabilities were calculated. And John, if I misspeak, you come right up here and correct me. But the liabilities went up very significantly because you had to change the discount rate that was calculating, the actuarial firms were using to calculate what that unfunded liability was. And so if they dropped that from 8% down to like 4.66 or whatever the numbers are, that shot up the liabilities for all school districts statewide very, very significantly. So I can't explain why you still have a net positive number, because most, 90% of the school districts in the state have a very large deficit.
Well, if I was reading the long-term liabilities correctly, we actually did a little bit better from 2016. 2016, our long-term liabilities were 151 million, and now they're 130 million.
But look at the next line for your pension liabilities is what I was just talking
Right. Oh,
about.
yeah.
Went from
Pension
45 million
went
to
up a little bit.
69 million. Through nothing that you as a school board decided. You decided on the long-term debt. You had a public vote about, investing in your community. Pension liabilities are assigned to you. They're not traditional liabilities that you could pay off even if you wanted to. You couldn't send a check down to TRA or PERA. And so for that reason, I just don't find that a meaningful number, or warranting significant discussion, because you don't have much control over that at all.
I'm just for the board's reference, I just think it should be in the report, but maybe that's not something we've done in the past.
Well, it's
so-
in our executive audit summary, it's just
Right.
not in the PowerPoint.
Okay. Thank you, I appreciate it.
Any other questions? Mary?
Yes, I sent in a series of questions about 2.5 weeks ago, and then I tried to send something this past week, and it kept bouncing back for some reason. I finally got it out, I think, either last night or it must have gone out early this morning.
No, I got it at 5:32 on my phone as I was driving here, actually. But I did get them at 5:32.
Okay, I had sent them out about 2.5 weeks ago, I think, through the district. This sent through?
Yes, I had gotten one copy.
Okay.
And then since it wasn't directed from a board level, as coming from a board level request that those questions be answered, they were not forwarded to Dennis, but I know Melissa and I, during our board session, asked several of those questions that you had requested.
Okay. Is there a chance that you could answer those?
I would suggest you ask them and then we'll see.
Pardon me?
If you want to ask them, we'll see. We'll be glad to try and answer them.
Okay, well, first of all, I did listen to the study session, and one of the things that kept coming up that you were saying, this is a new one, is that when the questions were asked, not all of them were asked, you had mentioned that you did a risk-based audit. Did you mean compliance, or what was your definition of risk?
I'm going to ask Jim to go get me some water, but when I said risk-based audit, each of the audits, do you want me to re-explain it, or it didn't make sense to you from the session, or, how much do you want me to recover that? So in terms of risk-based auditing, we simply take the financial statement of an individual school district, and we go through, like, starting with cash, that's always going to be a high-risk area, cash, right? Because you don't want anything to happen with cash transactions. That's probably the most important account of any school, so we're going to always make that sure we have an evaluation form for all the balance sheet items. State aids is always going to be very important, so we basically recalculate independently of the business office all of the entitlements to the extent practical. Federal aids is a big one. Taxes are huge, so we confirm as much information independently of the school district with the county. And we're very fortunate in Minnesota that with the Department of Ed, we can access great information independent of the school district and validate as much of that information as possible. But in terms of risk-based, all I was mentioning is that we don't put audit effort into areas where we don't feel like there's much risk. So we wouldn't put much audit effort into prepaids typically, or inventory typically. There's some calculations of liability. I mean, in terms of dollar amount, in terms of dollar thresholds and things that would maybe make it material, but most aren't.
Okay, so your risk-based audit was 100% financial based upon our existing financial statements compared to the MDE?
Compared to MDE?
MDE, Minnesota Department of, you said you could get that, like.
Well, no, it's
everyone
based on
can.
your, so what you're hiring us to do is to do audit of the district's financial statements. So all of the risks that we're talking about are what would prevent us from putting together a financial statement that, you know, with a high degree of confidence is accurate and complete.
Okay. My question had to do with the risk based upon your typical audit risk categories and how you use those as well as the internal controls. Because I kind of got the impression from the questions that you didn't really look into internal controls. You basically looked at the external facing financial numbers to be put it in layman's terms. Like you mentioned, like the cash position, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of my questions had to do with review of our internal controls of those policies and procedures before it actually gets into the system.
Okay.
And how that's handled. And was that not in scope, or was that in scope?
Well, I'm going to have to assume that there's a misunderstanding or a difference of opinion on what you think we were hired to do, because one of your first questions was, how did you audit internal controls?
Right.
And we did not audit internal controls because you didn't hire us to do that.
Okay.
We use your internal controls as far as we understand them to perform walkthroughs and to design the tests that we're going to do. But if you read the opinion, the audit opinion in the first page 16 of the CAFR, and it's just reading right from the opinion, the procedures selected depend on the auditor's judgment, including the assessment of the risks of material misstatement of the financial statements. Everything is always geared toward the financial statement, whether due to fraud or error. In making those risk assessments, the auditor considers internal control relevant to the entity's preparation and fair presentation of the financial statements in order to design audit procedures that are appropriate in their circumstances, but not for the purpose of expressing an opinion on the effectiveness of the entity's internal control. Accordingly, we express no such opinion.
Okay.
So I don't know if there's a misunderstanding about what you thought we were hired to do, but we do not audit internal controls.
Well, previous to the study session, I didn't have that. So that's probably why I asked the question.
The same opinion as every other year.
And then the other question was, I'm unfamiliar with the scope. The scope of the actual audit. Again, I'm new. So the scope of the actual audit was not repeated in the report other than in your cover letter. So that's why I was a little confused about the scope.
The scope is, I guess what I would recommend in terms of gaining a better understanding of that would be to probably get your hands on, and Julie can certainly forward our engagement letter, that somebody representing the board or governance, we call it. So I don't know who signed that letter, but it's always signed by somebody representing management and somebody representing the board. But it is very, very thorough. It's probably an 11 or 12-page letter nowadays explaining exactly what we're going to be doing. And it's really all the areas that I covered at the very first 2 pages of the PowerPoint, in terms of the audit, the financial statements, the student activity audit, the legal compliance, the single audit. Those are our scopes. That's what we say we're going to do, and we do it really well because our firm does more of that type of work in the state than any other firm. So.
Okay. I would appreciate, though, if you just answer the questions and set it to the board back when you get a chance. And most of them are yes or no, you know, in my questions, just so I can have it on record. And then, like I stated in the email, to copy it. And I apologize. I know that there was some confusion. I tried to send it to you directly, and then all this
Per
other
the board
stuff happened.
policy is you submit to Terry and or I, and then we, once we have board consensus, or before the board, those then are forwarded to Dennis for formal, for his review and to answer them. And you did not get those in time.
And I did get an email from you, or an inquiry from you on LinkedIn.
Right.
But as I explained, you know, I don't have a high degree of confidence with technology nowadays as far as anybody could email me and say, hey, I have questions, can you answer them on LinkedIn? So that's why I went to the school district to say, is this a valid response? Do you want me to provide responses?
Yeah, and what I said on LinkedIn is, having worked with Clifton Larson Allen before, that I wanted to ask permission first, and I said that before I sent you anything, I would copy the chair and the superintendent. I just wanted to make sure, because the Minnesota School Board Association had indicated it was okay for the board to contact directly, but I would have never have sent you anything without copying. Like I had said, I copied the chair and the superintendent. So then I went and forwarded the questions to them. And then at the last minute, of course, I couldn't come to the study session. But these are typical audit questions, so I was just for edification purposes. They were sent in originally almost 2.5 weeks ago.
And I would be glad to answer any questions that come to me as a board, as a unit, because we don't work for any one board member individually.
Understand.
Okay. Are there any other questions or comments? Stacy?
No, I just wanted to congratulate Julie and her group. I think every year that I've been on the board, we've had an excellent audit, and I believe this is probably, it's a clean audit, I think, like every year that we pretty much have. So I think all the effort that your group has gone through to put this together and continues to work each and every day, doing a great job. So I just wanted to thank you and your group.
Any other?
No, I just echo what Stacy said. Really appreciate all of your work. I'm assuming it makes your job a little bit easier, and it makes me feel a lot more comfortable with a clean audit. So thank you very much for your work. Appreciate it.
Go ahead, Tara.
I'd like to echo that too. I think sometimes when we hear year after year clean audit reports, especially some of the additional comments that you shared either tonight or during the work session about what a great fiscal place our district is, sometimes we start taking those things for granted. And I just want to call out that it's because of the day-to-day work of our business office. And I watched them during those weeks that you're here, and anything you needed, they were ready to provide for you, and it's so impressive. And I think it's a testament to the excellent fiscal accountability that we have, which is a promise to our community, and our second strategic direction, continued financial accountability to community while using available resources to educate students and maintain class-size targets. So I want to thank Julie and Michelle and their entire staff, and thank you, Dennis, and your staff for your time.
You bet.
Okay. And then I have a few comments here too. I'd like to thank you, first of all, as being our representative to provide us with information about the financial performance of this district. And it is a clean audit. There's no, as you stated, there's no other higher issuing that you can give to school districts, correct?
Correct.
Okay. A couple things that popped out in the audit for me. We were within 1% as a district of expenditures from our budgeted amount, from our final to our budgeted, within 1%. I don't know of any household which is in 1% of their budgeted expenditures at the end of the year. Not mine anyways. So that's a fabulous job for our business office. Second of all, our expenditures increased only 0.02% from the previous year to this year. That's an outstanding performance by our business office and business team with the increase. That's expenditures per student. With the increase in students, normally one would expect increasing revenues with increasing students, but you have kept it down to a really flat level. Thank you, Julie. And last but not least is our excellent fund balance of 10.11%. That shows excellent financial performance of this district, so I'd like to thank you for that. So, Melissa.
Yes, in summary, I had a comment. I did notice on page 7 that there was a change between the year 2013 and 2017 of
report
in the blue summary.
What page? For Dennis?
7.
On your page 7 on your presentation. Maybe
if I'm reading it correctly, in the general fund expenditures, there was actually a 10% increase from 2013 to 2017. Was there anything that we can attribute to that?
Line art number, is it just the total expenditure?
General fund expenditures per student. Over 5 years going up 10%. I don't know if there's anything, page 7.
Yeah, as I mentioned, in the old days, I don't know how long you've been dealing with school finance, but if you've been around as long as I have, you can remember the days when we still had a separate transportation fund and a separate capital expenditure fund. At some point, they all got rolled into the general fund. So you have trends like this that can kind of go up and down and things like that. And I mentioned the fact that I think from 2015 to 2016, a lot of that was, 2015 was a huge year where you had a huge amount of capital items. Now we've got a completely new formula in terms of long-term facilities maintenance that pulls a lot of that out over into the building construction fund. So it's getting less meaningful other than just as kind of an interesting aside, because normally, even with what I'm just talking about in terms of capital, the normal trend, if I were to show you a normal school district, almost any other school district, the trend is just gradually inflationary increases just normally bring that trend line up, up and to the right. So it's unusual to have it actually go down slightly, but I think most of the impact here is probably capital related. And these are years, since we're reducing it to per student, it's not based on the number of kids, but just, pretty well controlled over these last 4 years. If you factor out the capital stuff, and maybe we should do that next year. Maybe we should color code it so that the capital element of those five categories or 5 years of information segregate out how much of it is capital related. That might be a good idea, just so that you don't get any misleading, and maybe that would then show that inflationary trend.
I guess at our study session, we talked about a few other things that could be included in an audit. So in future years, because this audit is already done and baked, I guess I would like to entertain, because we're going to be taking a look at policy 702 later this evening, where we're talking about reporting and auditing and what could be included. Maybe in the future that we have one that's a little bit more in depth so that we can see everything.
That was
Some of
something we could
the
discuss.
questions I think that Mary had indicated, some of those are definitely non-audit related, though, types of projects. They'd be like an agreed upon procedures thing. I think one of your questions was like, how much did the audit focus on budget development or something, or future forecasting, I think was one of the questions. And of course, the audit is only looking backward based on what happened for the previous fiscal year, and you're well into the next fiscal year by the time the audit is occurring. But we don't have any reason to look at forecasting or anything like that. But we certainly could be engaged to do a project for that if there's a need. As far as we sort of view it as sort of a look over the shoulder type of a thing that basically takes the assumptions that you've set as a board and then makes sure that we would come up with the same conclusions. I wouldn't think that necessary here. I've already provided plenty of evidence to you that you're a very fortunate school board in that there are no surprises in terms of budget to actual outcomes for either revenues or expenditures. You're getting very reliable information already, so I don't think it would be worth investing in that. But if that's what you chose to do, we're certainly available to do that.
Point of clarification, the budgeting and forecasting was historical, and that was taken directly out of the Minnesota School Board Association training on what board members should ask, just so you know, just cut and paste,
Sure.
actually.
And, just to answer that in terms of the context of the budgeting, not so much the forecasting, because forecasting is definitely looking out into the future. The budgeting aspect of it, though, does get incorporated, though, because, when we're take taxes, for example, when we get done calculating what the taxes are and compare it to what the district has recorded, an important element of that from an analytic standpoint is budget to actual, as are comparisons like salaries and benefits. When you reduce it down to the program dimensions, you're seeing just a highly aggregated summary for the entire fund. But we actually do that down at a program level. And so we're going through there, that anything that's more than, say, a 10% variance from budget to actual or from an increase from the prior year to the current year, all of that's dug into. So there is an awful lot of work that factors in budgets, but not the development of it necessarily. And that's why I took the question.
Okay.
Okay. And review for me again. I think on the study session, you stated you do review relevant policies or financial policies with regards to the audit and how they affect our
To the
financial.
extent they are applicable.
Yeah.
One example might be like a P-card process. I think
Okay.
one of our elements of unpredictability this year, just by chance, I didn't know that you were going to ask about it, but I did look to see what our element of unpredictability is. An element of unpredictability is something that our firm does on audits so that you don't know ahead of time what it's going to be. And it changes every single year. So we have a whole repertoire of things that we could cycle through as far as an element of unpredictability. Business offices don't typically like it. Board members do, because For this particular year, we have really fantastic software called IDEA, and it's a data extraction software where we get a download of your entire activity. In this particular case, what we decided to do was get a download of all your P-card activity. So we used our software to summarize your P-card activity by vendor and by card holder, and then by card holder and vendor. So those three elements, and so we have that summary, and it's just, you know, something that board members find interesting because it's something that you can relate to. It's something that you read about with other school districts in the newspaper. And just, I gave the example, I think, at the work session of Lakeville, where they felt like, you know, they switched auditing firms a couple of years ago because they weren't feeling like they were getting enough bang for their buck. And so they started an audit committee. And one of the things they really wanted us to do was get into their P cards. And so they were really intrigued by getting the output of that. So it's something that's available, but since I only mentioned it because that was one of the questions that was asked. But and it was only because it was our element of unpredictability this year. I can't promise that that's something that we would do every year. But it'd be available as a project, you know, like Shakopee, you're all familiar with. They've asked us to help with a project similar to that, so with P cards. So.
And I did ask the question about P cards, a generic question with that, with regards to our policies on P cards, petty cash, and any cashier's checks to make sure that they were included in the internal audit. But I'm kind of getting the impression, you know, a lot of the questions that I asked were based on internal controls, they're generic questions, but it sounds like the scope of the audit, I just want to clarify this, did not include internal controls for what we were doing.
No, we have to understand your internal controls, and we have to decide if they're working as intended. So there's an actual I know you'd be amazed at the amount of audit effort that goes into understanding your controls. And then we do walkthroughs of those controls to make sure they're functioning as you represent them to us. And so, for example, a bank reconciliation as an example, that we would do a walkthrough of that. So of course at year end, June 30th, we're going to recalculate the amount of cash, you know, confirm it and verify what's in the bank, but then work through the reconciliation to make sure that we agree with what's the book balance. But as far as the walkthrough, that could be any other month that we would select to make sure that the system is working as it's represented to us.
You take a sample, a random sample of a month.
Yep, and same with general disbursements. If you had a cashier's check, I don't believe there were any. I think, you know, several years ago there was one issued for one specific transaction. But if there were, we would expect that would be part of the random sample that goes into our check sequence. So they provide a beginning and ending check sequence. And included with that would be anything that, you know, where cash left the district through a cashier check or the normal check stock that gets used. And then it's subject to audit through random sample. So we always want to create the impression with the business office that every single transaction is subject to audit. And you're not going to know because it's random sample. And so you have to document everything as if it was subject to being selected. Of course, it'd be impractical for us to test every transaction, but yeah.
So the sample of the bank reconciliation question that I did ask, that was something that you did do?
I didn't look between 5:30 and now.
Okay, I just want to know, because that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
Okay, anything else?
Just have one clarification. The audit that you did, is that pretty much standard that you do in all school districts?
It's just the standard financial statement audit that's required under state statute.
Okay, so we're getting what we've asked for in your
Absolutely.
audit? That's my understanding. Okay, fine. Thank you very much for all of your efforts.
And I hope I
Again-
didn't say anything that made it sound like we didn't do something.
No, I just wanted to clarify
No,
for
it's-
everyone.
you know,
And I just want to thank you again for your work, and especially for those in the school district and the business office. You do a great job. So I think we're ready to move on.
Did we get all of our questions answered?
Well, I sent my questions in, and they're the same ones that were sent in. And if there's anything on there that people have a question about or don't think is appropriate, then just let me know.
All right. Seeing no more further questions,
We have a motion and a second.
we had a motion before.
Yep.
Correct? So all those in favor for acceptance of the 2016-17 audit report signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That passes 6-0.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dennis. And John. Next on the agenda is a 2017-18 enrollment update, and presented Executive Director of Business Services, Ms. Sink.
Good evening again. On your desk, you have a detailed enrollment update, but also there is, if I can get this up here now. You can see it up here anyway. Oh, shoot. Our enrollment, October 1, we always talk a little bit about October 1 enrollment, that is what we base our budget on. And this is what we would start receiving funding from the state of Minnesota for enrollment. We budgeted 8,554 students. Our October 1 enrollment was 8,561 students. So you can see we're just slightly above what we had budgeted for the year. And the one area I do want to point out, however, is our early childhood special ed. We budgeted, and when we talked about it last spring, our enrollment of 42. It's much more difficult to budget for our ECSE, and that's because it's based on seat hours. How many hours of the day that we have students here? So we can have, we have over 150 students in our early childhood special ed program, as you can see, but it only equates to 42 pupil units. And so therefore, it really depends on the students that we have in that program and the amount of hours that we're servicing those students here. So I'm estimating our early childhood special ed enrollment as of October 1 to be about 82, almost double the number that we had. That number is growing. We did a little research into how are we seeing those students coming in. You're hearing that we have additional special ed needs in our district. And we did see it grow over the last year significantly, from the beginning of last year to the end of last year, and now again continuing to grow this year. So we're seeing some definite growth in those birth to 5 before they get into kindergarten for special ed services. Any questions about that?
Any questions right now? No. We are required by law to take
Yes, we are.
early childhood special education students.
We
correct?
are
We have no
required to
choice.
service those students in birth to 5.
Thank you. And next on the agenda is the class size report. Is that you, or is that?
I just.
Oh, okay. Okay, you didn't show it normally. Okay, so we have it on the board, and I thought you were going to show it up front. All right. And this is a report only, correct? So we can discuss it, but there's no action required by the board tonight, so. All right. Any questions or comments for administration on the numbers that you're seeing? Seeing none. I did take a quick look, and compared to last year, we are up on our average class sizes at most schools compared to our October 1 counts of last year. So, thank you, I guess. Any other comments or questions? All right, seeing none, we will move on to the referendum update. Dr. Stahel.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Good evening, board members. I want to take this opportunity to update you and the community on the referendum information campaign. As board members, you approved the resolution to place 2 questions on the ballot for our community to consider on November 7th. Our collective responsibility now is to ensure that all community members have access to the facts of the proposal and the ballot questions. So to ensure that our district information is focused at each specific site, we have established referendum site teams. These teams consist of small groups of parents, staff, led by our administration from each site, to serve as an extension of the district communication plan for the referendum facts. Our goal is to communicate with with the stakeholders of each site, and the site folks are the experts at how best to communicate with their stakeholders. Site teams met on September 12th for training, and we have 14 teams total to help inform our community. In addition to the site teams, our communication plan also includes referendum materials that are displayed at each of our sites, including absentee voting information. We have shared referendum information and will continue to do so via parent and staff emails, newsletters to our broader community, social media, and at school events. We've also attended several meetings to share referendum information and to answer questions. We have several more meetings scheduled in the next couple of weeks. I've asked Christy to review where the referendum information is again on the website, just briefly. And then we just thought it would be good for our community and for all of you to, in case you haven't reviewed the referendum video.
Do that right now?
Okay, sure. Or I can finish and then we can go to it.
Okay.
So I'm going to go ahead and finish, and then we're going to go to the video. Perfect. The next slide, just wanted to be sure that folks were, remember that we do have absentee voting that can occur. All of that information, again, is on the website. We can do it through application, and folks can have the ballot mailed to them and then mail that back in, or go to Shakopee to the county offices for early voting. And then the last slide before we watch the video, just again a reminder to everyone where they can get information. We have 2 information sessions coming up tomorrow night and Thursday nights. We certainly welcome the public to attend those to ensure that they've got questions answered as well as facts of the referendum. And we've also got the website on there as well as the email and phone number. Also, just did want to, before we share the video, did want to just say that as we've talked about with our community, regardless of the outcome of the referendum, we have been clear with our community that we'll need to make some elementary boundary adjustments to even out our enrollment at our schools. We also, as we promised to our community, need to continue to monitor open enrollment. So board members will be studying these issues at the October 23rd board work session, where you'll examine some of the current capacity challenges and then provide input and identify a process and timeline that will lead to future decisions regarding boundary changes and open enrollment for the 2018-19 school year. So begin that work October 23rd.
Rich, I have a quick question if I could ask Terry.
Go ahead.
A lot of activities going on at the high school tomorrow night. Where is the meeting for tomorrow night? Is it in the auditorium? Just so folks know exactly where to go.
We're looking at the lecture hall for tomorrow night.
Thank you.
And if we've got way too many people for the lecture hall,
We're prepared for the auditorium. Either way.
All right. I guess you're on then.
Okay, I'll take it away. So just to make sure that you're all aware of where the information resides on our website, we have it on our homepage. So anywhere you see this logo, you'll know that's information about the referendum, factual information that the district is putting forth to our public. So if you click from the homepage, it takes you to our landing page for the referendum website. Probably the most beneficial spot to go for all of the information that Terry referenced is, our fact sheet is here. We have a sort of a condensed version of that called the Quick Facts here. Questions and Facts is a sort of an FAQ page that we keep adding to as we get questions from the community. We have a list of construction projects that would be funded if the referendum is approved. The referendum presentation that Dr. Stallo gives out in the community is here as well. There's also voting information, so people can learn all about absentee voting, where their polling location is. And then we have a detailed, this is a sort of an overview of our tax impact, but then we also have a tax calculator, so someone can scroll down and they can type in their market value and find out exactly how much the referendum would cost per month or per year. And then finally, I just wanted to show you our video. It's about 3 minutes long. And then all of these little ones next to it are like 15-second pieces from the main video. And those are really mostly helpful for social media, but they're here as well. So I will play that for you now.
This fall, Prior Lake Savage Area Schools opened its doors to the largest student enrollment in its history with more than 8,500 students. We are a popular school district that has been growing for a long time. Families move here for our quality teaching staff, strong academics, and excellent cities. We're excited to welcome new families into our district, but most of our schools are at or over capacity, and our classrooms are getting increasingly crowded. That's why the school board is asking residents to vote on 2 school funding requests to address this growing enrollment and maintain a high-quality education. Here are the facts so you can make an informed decision this November. Fact: we will continue to grow. More than 2,100 new students are projected in the next 10 years, and they need space. 2,100 kids would fill 2 middle schools, 4 elementaries, or 27 school buses. Fact: because our schools are full and families keep coming, a 50-member resident task force was formed to study our growth. They analyzed a lot of data, heard from experts, and concluded we need more classrooms, staff, and materials to teach our students. Fact: if we add space for more students, it will take money to fill that space with teachers, furniture, technology, and classroom supplies. Fact: nearly all Minnesota school districts rely on locally approved operating levies to run their schools. In Prior Lake Savage area schools, our per-student operating levy is one of the lowest in the area. That means we don't have as much money as our neighbors to hire and retain great teachers, provide quality classroom materials, and operate our schools. Fact: people like it here. In the past 5 years, the city of Savage has added an average of 210 residential units each year, and Prior Lake has averaged more than 160 per year. And a recent survey of our school district staff found that 99% of staff are proud to be associated with our school district and its brand. Based on these facts, the school board decided to ask residents if they would help solve these problems by increasing funding. So on November 7th, voters will decide on 2 funding requests for our schools. Question 1 asks for bond funds to address our growing enrollment by building a new elementary school and area learning center and renovating or adding on to almost all other schools. Question 2 asks for an operating levy increase to maintain our current schools, as well as hire staff for the growing enrollment, maintain class sizes, and operate the additional school spaces in Question 1. If voters approve both requests, the tax impact on a $300,000 home will be less than $2,150 per month. So what will happen if voters say yes or no? If they vote yes on both questions, we would soon have the space, staff, and materials we need for the students who are already here and for those who are coming. If they vote yes on question 1 but no on question 2, we would have more space but no money to operate, staff, equip, and run those new schools and spaces. If voters turn down both requests, we'll continue to grow, but we won't have space for all of our students. That would mean class size increases, elementary boundary changes, bus changes, and potentially school start time changes. Those are some of the most important facts. For even more facts, visit our website, send an email, or give us a call. No matter what, learn what you can, and remember to vote on November 7th.
Next on the agenda is the adopt a resolution appointing election judge. And we have 2 tonight, one for the city of Prior Lake. Be it resolved by the Independent School District 719, the individuals specified in your Exhibit A attached, each of whom is qualified to serve as an election judge, are hereby appointed as judges for election for the school board, district special education on November 7th, 2017, to act as such at the polling places and combined polling places listed on said exhibit. Do I have a motion to accept the resolution as read? By Melissa. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Lee. This is a resolution, so it requires a roll call vote.
Aye.
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 That passes 6-0. And second is the resolution concerning the city of Savage, because the city of Savage has a bank of electors, and it's a city council election also on that same date, the city of Savage. So whereas the city council is required by law to provide election judges to conduct the general election, and whereas the staff has provided the names of persons who are willing and qualified to serve in said capacity. Now therefore be resolved by the mayor and the council of the city of Savage, Scott County, Minnesota. The recitals set forth above are incorporated herein, and hereby appoint the following persons to serve as election judges for the November 7th, 2017 general election. Do I have a motion to accept the resolution and the election judges? So moved by Ben. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Stacy. This is also a resolution, so it requires a roll call vote.
Aye.
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 That passes 6-0. Next on the agenda is the second and final reading for the following policies as listed.
we need to set the date.
Oh, I'm skipped. I'm going too fast. Next on the agenda, as I've been corrected, is to set the date to canvass the election for the November 7th special election. The board is required to adopt the resolution canvassing the results for the election between the 3rd and the 10th day following the election. The regular board meeting date is November 13th, and that's what we are recommending. Do I have a resolution to accept the canvass date for the date for the canvassing the election results? Do I have a motion?
Point of question, do we need to set a time?
Yes.
Yes.
Do a 6:30?
Should we do 6:30? Okay. Thank you, Melissa. So do I have a motion to set 6:30 p.m. on November 13th to canvass the results of the election?
So moved.
By Melissa. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Lee. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0. Now we move on to policy. The second and final reading of the following policies as listed in your board book. Mr. Mons, do you have any, no further comment? I thought you might be presenting since you did at the board study session, but no. So do I have a motion to accept the policy? Why don't we take them as sections? Or how do you want to do this, board? Section A and B and then, or C?
We should do each one.
Okay, let's do each one. Do I have a motion?
A, B, and C, I mean, not
Yes,
each
I
policy.
understand that. Do I have a motion for the second and final reading acceptance for policy 702.1, the electronic fund transfers?
So made.
By Stacy, do I have a second?
Second.
By Lee. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Under General Statement of Policy 3B1, can you walk us through for the board's information where the oversight is for the school board shall annually delegate the authority to make electronic fund transfers to a designated business administrator? Is there oversight there?
Yes, we make that appointment yearly at our planning meeting,
Okay.
first meeting of the year, and that's
Okay.
part of
Does
the
that need to be
resolution.
said in the policy here?
No, I think
Part
annually
of the
delegated.
organizational.
It's it's part of the organizational meeting at the beginning of the year.
Perfect. Thank you.
All right. Any other questions? Seeing none, all those in favor for acceptance of policy 702.1 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed, that passes 6-0. Do I have a motion to accept the policy with no recommended changes for 416, 427, 428, 702? Do I have a motion to accept those?
moved.
By Lee. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Stacy. Are there any questions?
I have a question.
Melissa.
Policy 416, the drug and alcohol testing. Under 3, General Statement of Policy, Paragraph 6, just as a question here, it says the employee has a right to explain a positive test result on a confirmatory test or retest and request and pay for a retest. So if they have a positive, they have a right to explain it? Can you walk us through that?
Mr. Mons, can you help
Sure.
us there?
They have a right to explain how they got that positive. They'd generally be saying that it was a false positive, and then they have the ability to retake a test if they would like to. And what I would mention is that we have this language and this procedure in there because it's really what's dictated in order to have a disciplinary action succeed in arbitration. And so that's why we have this language in there written the way that it is. That being said, we have not found that language to be an impediment to taking appropriate action in the case that we've had any of those incidences occur.
Awesome, thank you.
All right. Any other questions?
That was on that policy.
Okay. Any other questions? Did you have a question, Mary?
Which one, policy 702 was an accounting? The only thing that I had.
We already, 702, go ahead.
The
Excuse
one
me,
that's
yeah.
this one. So we have a limit with petty cash, but we don't have anything with the P card. There's no mention of a limit or anything like that.
We had a lot of discussion on this at the
Yeah, we
study
discussed
session.
this at the study session, and we do have limits. Most of the cards have limits on them. They have to come to the business office to be adjusted if there's a reason that they have a need or want to raise it. We can raise it for a period of days or months if we want to, depending on if we have large technology purchases that we want to take advantage of those rebates, we may increase those cards for that month and then reduce it back down to the limit. But most of them have a small limit on them per month.
Is there a standard limit that we order the P cards for and then go on it? Because that wasn't really mentioned in the policy, that's why I'm asking.
There's not a standard limit, but we do monitor those on a monthly basis.
Question?
I guess I have a question there, and I hadn't thought of this during our study session. The first read, and now this is the second read, the reason why we have these read a couple of times, in case something else comes to mind. I'm familiar with most organizations having some sort of a limit. Have we considered that? Is it by job description? I mean, 5,000, 10,000? I mean, I would think that there would be some sort of limit to help.
Julie?
Currently, our limits aren't even that high for
Yeah.
majority
Whatever.
of our staff.
Yeah, I think
They're
you
like
talked
a-
about it at the
yep.
study session.
Yep. They're not that high for the majority of our staff that have them, and most of our secretaries have a little bit, like a couple $1,000 limit, but the majority of them are $1,000.
Is
Some
there?
are even $500.
Is there, usually there's a need for separation of duties. You'd have the executive director of financial affairs separate from business director for oversight purposes when it comes to those sorts of things. Have we considered that?
Each of our principals have oversight over their staff, of what that limit is per their staff. I only get involved, I have 2 accountants in my office that handle the P cards and oversee that, as well as our purchasing department, or our accounts payable department.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I had a question on this. I sent in a question, oh gosh, a long time ago when some of these got brought up, and the reporting one, and this is more of a convenience issue.
Which policy are you?
On 702 again, on the general statement of policy, maintenance of books, accounts, permanent fund transfers, and then C was reporting. And the only comment that I made, and this is more of an efficiency area, is, most of the other boards I sit on and a lot of other school boards, instead of having to create a PowerPoint presentation with the funds, they just run the report right out of the financial system for disbursements and all that, and then just PDF it and send it out instead of having to do the PowerPoints. And I had asked if that would be more efficient for you guys a while ago, and if the reporting would come directly out of the ERP system. I'm not even sure if that's possible.
The
but
treasurer
most of
gets
them do.
our reporting directly out of our financial system.
Okay. Would it be easier to put that for the whole board and not just for the treasurer? Just to save time and effort?
It's quite lengthy, and so I
But
think it's the reason that we do that. That's been the board's process for as long as I've been here.
Well, I mean, it's part of the consent agenda normally, and it's quite lengthy, and that's fine. That just, it proves due diligence and oversight by the board. I would think it would make it quite a bit easier than doing these PowerPoints and trying to get the check numbers in the right format and all that kind of stuff on the summary. It's just the disbursements and the total statement each month.
Are you,
This is
They're on a
are you
spreadsheet,
talking
not
about
a
that
PowerPoint.
packet of papers that we used to get all the time? And I think a decision was made that it was kind of silly, actually, with all those papers and stuff. Now, I understand that it can be electronic, but my understanding is it's always been available. If we want to look at it, that we can come in and look at it, and a full copy goes to the treasurer. So it's available to you, but it was very cumbersome, and a vote was made by the board at that time, I believe. If we're talking about the same thing, that we didn't need to do that anymore.
And I don't know if we're I have no idea because I haven't seen it. I know that in the beginning I asked a few questions and about just getting the full financial statement. I never really got an answer.
The monthly one?
Yeah, the monthly one.
Okay,
Just
yeah,
having
I'm thinking it
run
is
it
the same.
automatically.
And
Okay.
that, the decision was made that it was just too cumbersome to give to all board members. Not that they couldn't get it, they could come into the office and get it at any time. That was the decision at that time.
Okay. I'm just thinking it would be easier because I know that I've had questions about the PowerPoint a few times and,
I don't do a PowerPoint for that.
well, I'm not sure what if is that a
The
spreadsheet?
spreadsheet,
Yeah.
it's a spreadsheet,
Yeah,
it lists
to
all the
manually
account,
do
it
that.
lists all of our numbers, our check numbers. It'll now have all of our electronic transfers. It has most of our, as you know, most of our information is done by ACH now. And so it has all our ACH numbers on there, has a total amount of dollars we've expended for each of our accounts, payroll, accounts payable. So it's
It's got about 4 or 5 line items on it. It's got the totals per month with minimal detail. And I'm just thinking that it'd be easier and to have the reporting policy, just have it spit out automatically, because most tools do that automatically now anyways. And therefore, if we have any questions, it isn't a separate email between board sessions and asking about the detail. I asked about it I think it was the first time like a couple of months ago, just out of efficiency purposes. And also for time saving.
Well, and I think when I was being trained for treasurer position, that is something I think we can consult the Minnesota School Board Associations on, because there was specific training involved with just duties of the treasurer and how the structure of the board works. So I think before making any type of change like this, I would suggest that we look at MSBA and see what they recommend.
And Stacy, a lot of the other school boards do it. It is lengthy. You look at it if you want to that month, you just put out there. And they do that for convenience and also so that the district can say that the board saw the detail, whether you choose to look at it or not.
Perhaps years ago, it was eliminated because, like you said, it was silly to give out that much paper.
Yeah.
But now it's
Yeah,
electronic.
I mean, it didn't make sense at that time. I mean, if we want to look at it, I guess that's a discussion we as a board can have and decide if we want to put that back in.
Well, we can add that to one of our study sessions
Yeah,
or something like
say, I
that.
don't think, now it's, not the time.
Okay.
Put that note for us.
That was the only question that I had.
Put that on for an upcoming study session. All right. Any more questions concerning Section B policies? All right. Seeing none, all those in favor of acceptance of the policies listed signify by saying aye.
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 All those opposed? That passes 6-0. And elimination of the following policies, 411 and 424. Do I have a motion for the elimination of those following policies?
So made.
By Stacy. Do I have a second?
Second.
By Ben. Any questions or comments?
Can you give us some background as to why they were eliminated? So we
think
can
Matt
share that
did.
with everyone.
Mr. Matt Mons, I think we reviewed this during the study session, but if you could do that for us again, please.
Yep, no problem. First of all, our Viva policy that we had in there, that was a policy that we had created that runs counter to kind of the philosophy we've taken with our policies in regards to the rest of our benefit plans. The reason why we did that is because statutorily, as part of the cooperative name that I'm forgetting at the moment,
South Central Service.
the Central Services Cooperative. There we go. When we became a self-insured district and left the service cooperative, we no longer had the requirement of having that policy in place. So to be consistent with the rest of our policies, we are looking at eliminating that. We certainly have plan documents for all of our benefit plans that we hold by. And then when we're looking at the evaluation of probationary teachers policy, for one thing, that's a policy that was significantly outdated. It's not an MSBA recommended policy, which certainly isn't the reason for getting rid of it. But what it really is we look to always be in compliance with statute and also ensuring that we have a system in place that fits Prior Lake Savage area schools and our needs. And we certainly do not intend to drop our evaluation of probationary staff members. We intend to continue to evaluate our probationary staff members just like we do all of our continuing contract staff members as well.
Thank you for that clarification, Matt. Anytime we draft policies, I think it's always good, even though we discuss it at a study session, the public doesn't hear that. And when we're dropping a policy, I think it's important that everybody knows why. So that's good. Thanks.
I think the public does hear it, though. Isn't it audio recorded? I mean, that's.
We do have that option to listen.
Yep. All right. So I have a second or motion and a second for the elimination of those following policies. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0. Next, administrative reports. Dr. Stallo.
Thank you. At Prior Lake Savage Area Schools, our mission is to educate all learners to reach their full potential as contributing and productive members of our ever-changing global community. Our collective work is focused on that mission, and tonight I'd like to highlight just a bit of the work in which we've been engaged. First of all, I had the opportunity to visit with MNCAP's students, staff, parents, and other community members at their Taste of Healthcare event last Wednesday. Students represented a healthcare company during a career fair created and designed by the students specifically for hiring healthcare professionals. The students screened prospective candidates for a new position at their student-centered facility. I enjoyed observing the students present and answering questions in a very professional manner. It really invites folks, if you haven't had a chance to visit MNCAPS, it would be a great opportunity for you. Tonight we had a chance to receive the check presentation from the Prior Lake Rotary for Music Fest. We also partner with Prior Lake Rotary through the Strive Student Mentorship Program at Bridges. Strive stands for Students Taking a Renewed Interest in the Value of Education, and the Strive mentors and mentees met for the first time last week, and it sounded like it was a wonderful first meeting. Just wanted to briefly highlight homecoming. We had a great week, which I know that Ms. Anderson is going to share more with us. I just want to thank everyone I know for staff and for parents and for students. It's a lot of extras, and I appreciate your continued focus on learning and continued focus on building community and spirit around our amazing school district. And with that, I'll leave anything else for homecoming to Ms. Anderson.
Are there any administrative reports this evening? Seeing none, are there any board reports this evening? Melissa?
Yes, a couple of events last week. The Early Childhood Family Learning Council meeting occurred. And we had a great council meeting. They've got a lot of fundraisers going on, and it was a real treat to interact with those folks. Also, I represented the board at the City Council work study session of fiber optic backbone. And this was the information to enhance our communications. Gary Sheldon from Scott County did the presentation, and there was actually an ask on behalf of the county and the folks in the room when it comes to our fiber optic needs. They would love to have the district offer more education classes on a community ed basis to help folks in the community understand more about how important our broadband fiber is. Education and healthcare are the biggest users of that. So we have a lot of small businesses and residential folks that could really benefit from learning about that. And Scott County has some unique aspects to bring to the table. So it was very interesting to learn that.
Okay. Any other board reports?
Let's see, I think Lee and I attended the foundation meeting on September 20th. The big thing there, their funding has been pretty solid over the last few years, and they're in the process now of hiring a permanent executive director to kind of work on the grants and going to the community. I know they have someone on a temporary basis doing that, just, getting their word out, getting their name out of who they are. Their big event coming up is the casino night on October 27th, and they invited us all to come. I know Dr. Stallo has tickets for sale if anybody who wants those, but it's at the Horse and Hunt Club. I believe it's at 6:30, and I think, like I said, it's a casino night, so that's their big event. And then on the 22nd, Dr. Stallo and I went to the C meeting. We had a presentation by Bill Morris, just kind of the state of where we're at this time of year with education and funding in the state. And then the ESSA, and I'm going to forget what that's for. You can, the acronym.
Succeed Act.
Every Student Succeed Act was explained by one of the policymakers of MDE. It was, I mean, for a non-lay person, it was kind of like, ooh, it's kind of heavy topic. But anyway, it was interesting to hear all the different things and just to kind of hear what a lot of the educators in the room really thought of this new legislation and how and the pluses and minuses. So that was pretty interesting. And then they also had a period of time where districts that were going out for referendum could sit down and talk with each other. So we sat with a couple other districts, Northfield, and the other one escapes me, that are going out for referendum and just kind of talk through, you know, what's happening in their district and that kind of thing. So it was good. So yeah, that's what I was up to.
I have a board report. Last Monday night, I with Stacy and Todd, Melissa, and myself were all there for the board scholar presentation. 378 board scholars were presented with awards, and that's one of my favorite events of the year. So it was a great night. And last but not least, our student, or excuse me, Melissa, I'm sorry.
Mary. I just wanted to remind everybody that the Southwest Intermediate District, which has 11 districts in it, which includes Prior Lake, is having their fundraising gala this Friday at Hazelton, and they still have some tables available. It's a great cause, like all education causes are, so I hope to see a lot of us there.
I'm sorry, Mary. And last but not least, our student board rep, Katie.
So as Dr. Salo already said, last week was our homecoming week, and we had an amazing week. We had over 1,800 students buy tickets, and previously last year we only had 1,400 students buy tickets, so that was a big change for us, and it was nice and sweaty on the dance floor. We also had a lot of students participate in all of our homecoming spirit days, and everybody, or not everybody, but a lot of people went to Powder Puff, Pep Fest, and had an overall great time. This week for Student Council on Wednesday, we will be kicking off a fundraiser where we're raising funds to donate to an organization called Good Hands for Harvey Victims, where every dollar that we donate, Allstate Insurance will be matching our donation. And so our goal for the community is $20,000. So we've reached out to all of the schools in the district, and none of them responded to our email. So that's good. So we're still kind of trying to figure out how we're going to do that, but we start at the high school on Wednesday. And then so from a student council aspect, my exec board has been meeting with the mayor, and we have created a little committee kind of thing. I don't really know. And we're all working with him to be student advocates for the County Road 21 and the Highway 13 road construction process. So we'll be at the open house tomorrow night. Thank you.
All right. Next, future events, we have a referendum info session on Tuesday night at Prior Lake High School starting at 7:30, and then Thursday the 12th right here at the District Service Center at 7 p.m. There is no school October 18th for what's commonly referred to as MEA. There also is no school E through 12 for October 23rd, and we will have a school board study session October 23rd at 6 p.m. right here in the District Service Center. Seeing no more items before the board, I ask for a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
By Ben, do I have a second?
Second.
By Stacy. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? That passes 6-0.